friend, I'm Deborah Larson.
And I'm Katie Shive.
And you're listening to the Redeeming Her podcast, where we aim to create a safe place for honest conversations that will inspire you to discover God's love through your pain. Our goal is to help you reframe your story and find freedom for the future.
So grab a latte and maybe some Kleenex, and let's dive into this week's episode.
Well, hello. Today, it feels like doing this podcast is like riding a bicycle. When you fall down, you get back up. Oh, goodness. So this morning, Kate, I decided I was going to get back into the workout. I got onto my Peloton bike and I'm like, this is cool. My husband was doing some customer service with a credit card and he was so loud, I kept cranking it up so I could just drown out the voice and figure out what I was doing. So I got into the groove and lo and behold, I thought, oh, pause. I can do this exercise. I can work this muscle because, we have to multitask. And all of a sudden I had this big ball, 10 pounds. And I was doing it. I'm done. So I drop it. And on the cycle, my foot hits it and tilts the whole bicycle flat. The whole Peloton. I have clip-ons on. I'm like, oh God, oh Jesus. So I waited for that next turn and it came back down. I was like, oh, that was a close call. So yeah, that's my funny story of the day.
Well, my Peloton story, I refer to my Peloton as the most expensive dust collector. I got it like half of the world during COVID. I was like, oh, this is a great cross-training complement to running. And so I'll cycle on the days that I don't run. I think I cycled like maybe 3 or 4 workouts and then like never again. So I did my little walk of shame and I did sell it. But it reminds me, my husband had a short stint in cycling as well. When we first moved to Reno, he got this fancy bike. And I was going to UNR at the time, so I bought him the full, spandex suit. And he gets his clip-ins and he's, riding out of our neighborhood and he gets up to a stoplight and he forgets that he hadn't practiced unclipping. And he's getting to the stoplight and he's frantically having to decide, do I run through and like hopefully not get hit or do I fall over? And he kind of tips over. I think the only thing that was bruised was his pride. But let's just say we also sold his bike and neither of us are cyclists. Now we have the cheater bikes. We have e-bikes with the big fat tires and that's much more of our speed than having these cool spin bikes.
Coob talked my husband into getting that and he rode it for about 3 months. I think he was shamed because I kept saying, it's a cheater bike. It's a cheater bike.
It's not a cheater bike, man. Those we drag our kids all over the valley. We have little seats in the back, but I don't have to wear clip-ons with these bikes. So yes, I'm a fan.
True. So you're safer than I am. That's
yes,
right.
I am safer than that. So well, I'm excited for this episode. I am really excited to jump in because we get to interview you. And I think I just know the person and the heart of who you are. And so I'm really excited to jump in a little bit and unpack some of that so other people can just see who you are. So are you feeling ready for this?
Oh, kind of. But if I could be honest, it's a little nerve-wracking. I have done so many great things and launching businesses, different ministries, I've been working trauma, all that kind of stuff. But redeeming her is really different. It's super personal and it's challenging because it's stretching me out of my comfort zone. Like talking in front of people isn't a problem. This is just a little more private than I would like to choose if that were the case.
Yeah.
But the journey has required me to be comfortable in being transparent and more vulnerable. And I just am one of those quiet people. I really like to do things in private, especially deal with heart matters. And he's asked me to just be public and be authentic, which I can do, and share the journey. And I think it was when I began to understand about what absolute freedom was, then you can recognize the price it takes to get there, which is why I said yes to do this. Because regardless of how comfortable I am, I want to make sure other people can hear and benefit and hear about what God has done and how we can transition. And he's done that my whole life.
Yeah. You make a great point. It's one thing to walk through your own personal journey, and it's another thing to start sharing that publicly. It takes a lot of courage, and I think it really takes just a drawing from the Lord to say yes, because there is a cost that comes with being vulnerable and transparent. It kind of reminds me of something that Brene Brown said many years ago. She, gave this heartwarming talk and she got super vulnerable. And the next morning she woke up and she calls it a vulnerability like hangover. Where you're like, oh, was I too vulnerable? And should I have said that? And it really is. I think anytime we start to share a piece of who we are that feels really raw and intimate, that takes, it takes a lot of courage. So I really, I just respect your yes to even go there, because there is a lot to this. But I'm excited because he's been really good and your story is beautiful. So on that note, I want to start off by talking about the goodness of God, because I really believe that is a hallmark message in your life, truly knowing the goodness of God. I'm sure this is probably a no-brainer, but have you heard the song by Jen Johnson, The Goodness of God?
Of course. And
I feel like you cannot have walked into a church in the last 3 or 5 years and probably not heard that song. But I love one of the verses in the song, and it says, I love your voice. You have led me through the fire. In the darkest night, you are close like no other. I've known you as a father. I've known you as a friend, and I have lived in the goodness of God. And when I think of your story, from when you were a tiny little girl to the woman that you are today, so much of your testimony can be found wrapped up in that verse, right? Like you have hard things, but you don't live in a place of being a victim, or that's not your identity. Your identity really does draw people back to the goodness of the character and nature of God. So on that note, the first question I would love to ask is, can you share a little bit about your life and how the Lord has been so faithful to you?
It's his goodness. It's still his goodness. I mean, I can't even hear those words without wanting to just weep, because he has been so good to me. And in the description of my life journey, he has always been good to me, even when I didn't see it or understand it. I grew up in a very broken home, it was an abusive home. It was just not the best setting to raise children, and I can say that nicely. There were 6 of us. I was the third oldest, only girl for 10 years. So it was really different. My dad was in the military. He took off. He was gone a long time. It seems like he left at 3 and came back when I was 8, which is a long time. And as a little girl, being the only girl, I felt like, oh my God, I have all these wolves in the house and I don't know what to do with it. And I'm like, all of 3 to 5, what do you say? And yet, even when I was afraid, the Spirit of the Lord would always visit me. And so I felt like he taught me, this is a safe place and this is a not so safe place. So stay in this position, and that's kind of where I camped. It's almost like I always knew that there was a God. Like I always knew that he was present and he never left me, And then you get to the teenage years where everything's shifting and changing. And I had literally gained a lot of weight. Like food, I think, was the comfort, just trying to stay inward. You would think knowing me today, nobody would go, no way, but that's not believable knowing who you are today, because you're so crunchy. You're crunchy times 10 compared to me. Like you drink spirulina for breakfast. And I was like, you drink what?
So that's hard to believe because of who you are, as literally a health nut. But
Yeah. But even in that place where I felt so benign, I just felt like I just blended in and it's okay. So people would leave me alone. But he laced me with gifts and talents and things I never earned. I had a music ear. I learned to play the violin. I had just a knowledge base that I think it was like I was born with it. And I'm so grateful because I didn't have to even earn it. And I look at that as goodness because it was pathways out. When I needed
yeah.
music, I could go to the music. I could get in the vibration, if you would. It was just crazy, but then I look up where I came from, and I'll just give a little setting. My mom did her best. She grew up with manipulation. She had an arranged marriage at 16. I mean, I can't imagine that. And there was a lot of abuse in the family, mostly sexual abuse. And so that was her norm, because if that's all you know, that's your norm, right? But she did some great things in our family. And the greatest thing she did was she introduced us to Jesus. Her grandma did. And so we always had this thread of hope and truth that was just woven in our family. And so she'd pack up a whole family, take us to church, take us to every event. She'd take us to these evangelistic meetings, and then we'd have Bible study in the garage. And then out of nowhere, a Ouija board would show up, and I was like, what is that? And those kinds of exposures, kind of what I do is like mixed dreams, and it can confuse you. So I was grateful that the Spirit came to me and it was like, this is the safe place and this is not the safe place. And so again, I wasn't mature in my understanding, but I felt like he guided me through all of that mess, But I have to say, when I turned 18, I bolted out as fast as I could. I never looked back. And it's
Yeah.
not like I didn't have family relationships. I just never looked back. If there were challenges in front of me, I just looked forward because I knew there was going to be a way that he would pave it, open the doors, or help me through it, And so, interesting enough, I did marry when I was young, and I married early. I had 2 sons, and I was the best mom. I was going to be the best mom in all the world, and I loved my kids. We played karate in the living room. We did all kinds of superhero things. I enjoyed being the mom of boys. Unfortunately, that marriage ended several years down the line, and I found myself single, and now I'm trusting the Lord to help me pick up all these broken pieces, because I was never gonna marry but one person, and then both my heart and my kids' heart. And I'm like, all right, I can do this because God's equipped me. I can do this. And then he took that time and he drew me to him, and he helped me develop a spiritual connection to him. Something that really wasn't in our churches of the day. That wasn't the norm.
Right. Yeah.
That was never going to happen. And yet I had this awakening of knowing that there was something more than just that. So from teaching me how to pray and teaching me how to connect, I felt like I could be fully transparent with him, So when things happened, I could get pretty angry about them. And like when the marriage ended, I was extremely disappointed. I was frustrated. I felt like I followed all the rules. How many of you have ever done that? You followed all the rules. You did everything you were taught. This is how we do church. This is how we do marriage. And it felt like it just was not okay that it just ended. And so because I love God and because we have that conversation, I had those conversations. He's not afraid of the hard talk. He's not afraid, of your, hey, you promised this and this didn't happen this way. And that's how we began to really grow a stronger relationship. Years later, I decided through those disappointments that I'm going to get married again, but I was going to do it my way because I followed all those rules. And, that husband took his choices and options. I couldn't even measure up to it. He chose a whole different lifestyle. And I can't help you there, So I did it my way. And that didn't fare so well.
Rarely does it ever.
It's like, okay, I'm in it for the long haul. We'll do this. And yet again, I felt like history was repeating itself. And it was like so devastating, I found myself yet again, disappointed. And here I am, hurt, disappointed, and single parenting. Thank God my other two boys had already moved out, and got on their own, but still I was a mom, a teenager, and it's still devastating to your kids no matter what age that is.
Absolutely.
So I spent like 9 years, and I have to say this pocket of time was so imperative in my relationship with God and developing in the mature area of my life. But 9 years where Jesus began to court my heart. Now, I've never even heard that word used in our culture, but to court my heart, it was the best description for that whole season. I was happy I was out from underneath the weight of that relationship, but I was far from actually knowing the true love of God for me and receiving it. And so it was beautiful. It was uncomfortable, but it was a life-changing experience. And that's when he taught me how to receive love, to receive it honestly and authentically. And I realized today, not then, that he was preparing me for the greatest gift, which is my husband today, Raymond. He is, in every sense of the word, my kinsman redeemer. He is. And we just celebrated 15 years of marriage, and I know the best is like on its way to come.
That's so beautiful. I will interject and say, I met you when you and I first met was when you were in that season of, that courtship with the Lord. And, from an outside perspective, you were just this gorgeous inside and out, confident woman. And I guess I don't know, I didn't know you prior when you were in your other marriage, but you could absolutely see there was something different about you, the way that you talked about the Lord. And you were in no way, looking, it's almost like you were in your prime beauty and career and all of these things and probably could have dated anybody. And yet you were like, I'm good with Jesus for the rest of my life. And there was just this confidence about you and how in love you were with the Lord. And it was so beautiful. And it's absolutely still who you are today, but it is really sweet to also see, Raymond come into your life and in the marriage that you guys have now. I love how there is a thread of redemption woven through every fabric, every detail of your story. You talked about growing up in an abusive home and having a failed marriage and navigating single motherhood, which is no such small feat. And yet from someone from a very early age, like you've known and heard the Father's voice, and he has pursued you even in your rebellion, for lack of better words. Like he's been so good and so faithful to you. And through that all, you've kept your heart open and unoffended toward the Lord. Can you talk about how God presented himself to you as a father? You talk about your physical father left when you were really young, but can you talk about how God himself presented to you as a fatherly figure?
Well, as I said, when I was a young girl, I missed my dad a lot. And so I'd have tea parties in the bedroom and I'd sit by myself because the boys didn't come in. And Jesus would show up and he would just comfort me. And I would set three seats, 3 little teacup parties. And then Hope came in. So Jesus and Hope showed up. I was like, oh, that's an angel, but what I learned is it's really, she's a spirit. And she walked with me with the Holy Spirit and teaching me how to engage with him. And it was such a beautiful time because the function of that is to build hope in us, to help us go through those things, whether we understand them or not. During the teenage years, it was some sad years, like super sad years. And I remember curling up into the closet on top of all these shoes that were whatever we bought, and I would hide myself in there and I would just pray to the Lord because it's my only place I could find peace. And I remember crying out, like, what is wrong? When is this going to shift, Lord? When is my life going to change? I know this isn't what you'd had for me, And then he just said, I love you. It was like the first time I heard him speak to me. I think I was 14. And so those are anchors that I have never forgotten. And I was just like, did I hear something? And it just came again. It was like an audible whisper. I love you. And I said, you do? I mean, I didn't hear that from my dad. I didn't hear that from my family, so it was something in dire need. And then in my second marriage, there was a lot of struggles. We had some challenges, like everybody has normal challenges, but when you're blending families, it can be really, really difficult. And my firstborn, he was 14 and he ran away and he disappeared for 6 months. And the overwhelming agony and the frustration that I felt was just, I couldn't even get myself off the floor for the first 30 days. And the tension and the discord and everything that happens inside a family. And yet we were very silent about it. I never called the police. I never looked for any kind of governmental assistance. I was like, I have to go to God. I have to go to the Holy Spirit and he will direct me. During that time, Katie, he let me be me because I was messy. I was angry. I was frustrated. You promised me this would never happen to my children. And I just really had it out with the Lord. At the same time, all of my agony and grief, were coming to the surface. And here's what I learned. He's available. He's always available. Like he keeps his word. He is not offended from our traumatic responses. He's not offended at my accusations because you said this, but this isn't what it was like. And I couldn't understand because we couldn't justify that. And then in that whole journey, and we can talk about another episode, but he delivered his promise in the hardest of circumstances. He literally did the impossibility. He brought him home in the course of all that. There was no cops. There was no nothing. He brought him home safely. And it was such a beautiful restoration. And I just thought, when you look back, that just doesn't happen.
Right.
If I hadn't stayed on my face before the Lord while running a business, while taking care of 2 other kids and trying to figure out when is this going to happen? Like holidays come, Mother's Day comes, and you're like, I'm going to die. And yet he's so compassionate and always available. All I had to do was talk to him.
Yeah. I love how the Father meets us in every season, exactly what you're talking about, both, in our todays and our tomorrows. And he gives us exactly what we need if we let him. But the emphasis is on if, right? Like, I feel like as humans, we're so quick if something goes wrong or it's painful or it's out of what, we feel should be in our life plan, we're usually the first ones to blame God. Somehow he's all knowing, whatever, and it's his fault. Which is really a wrong thinking, but it's often what we do. So that leads me to my next question. How did you learn to trust the Father in the midst of so many of your painful experiences?
Well, truthfully, during that season when my son was gone is where I built a trust in him because nobody had ever kept their word to me. Nobody had ever followed through. Most people don't deliver, and I've had all this failure, and I'm like, well, then if God is, then this should have happened.
Right.
But he taught me to build an altar, what I call an altar of remembrance. I would run the trail up there, when we used to run together in the early years. And I was running the trail, and one day he would speak to me and he said, I want you to take a stone and put these victories that I've done in your life. I'm like, okay. And then you can put prayer requests if you want, but I want you to run off when the water was down on the river, remember? And then you run in all the gravel. I would put these stones down there. So I did that for a period of months. And he said, I want you to build a stone altar. And he goes, it's the altar of remembrance. And I'm like, wow, okay, what is that? And he says, when your world gets rocked, when things come and they take you by surprise, when you can't expect it and you have all these questions, I want you to anchor on that altar of remembrance of all the things I've done for you, all the things I have fulfilled. And it'll stabilize you. It'll bring you into this place and you will center like crazy. I don't understand how the weather is. I don't understand this, but I know this. This is his nature. This is his word. And he always delivers. And so that was one of the biggest things that he gave me. And I learned how to stay there because in the mature part of me, when our frontal lobe actually gets to maturity and we can reason with ourselves, then I can literally say, but I know you, so I'm going to wait here until the weather and the storm passes. And then he illuminated his character. He's faithful. He does follow
Yeah.
through all the things we've talked about. And so when I got that, he was like saying, don't ask me why all the time, Deborah. Ask me when, where, how, and who. I'm like, because?
Right.
He goes, because when you ask me why, you've already got a predisposition of what your expectation will be. Ask me how I'm going to fulfill it. Ask me those things. And he goes, stand on my character because I have proven myself to you. And he has. And then the
Yeah.
second thing was know the word, the written word and the living word that lives inside of you.
Right. When I love how you talk about the stones of remembrance, because, that supersedes emotion or feeling or perspective. A stone of remembrance is marking truth. It's marking something that actually happened that you can anchor into. And so when circumstances happen and you're like, oh, but it doesn't feel this, or you go back to those moments, but he met me here and
Yes.
he did this. It's not, I hope he will, I think he might. It's an actual, you're reminding your spirit and calling to attention truth. And that builds, hope, and that builds just an anticipation for him to do it again. Because if he's done it once, he'll do it again. He'll keep his word.
Yeah.
And so it's really powerful tool, not just as a testimony of, that one time that you've used in your life, but for today and for anybody listening is, when you're going through a hard circumstance or a season of whether that's actually writing something on a literal stone, writing it in stone,
Yeah.
or if it's something in your journal or, whatever that looks like, but it's building that history of that place of remembrance with the Lord, because it supersedes emotion and it anchors you in truth, which is more, it's higher than any feeling or emotion or perception. So, I want to jump into a little bit deeper. And this is probably part of the story that some of our listeners might be drawn to, just because of what has happened. But I really want to talk about your greatest loss, and what that was. So can you talk to us about, what your greatest loss is and really what kind of launched you into redeeming her?
Yes. I knew we were going here. Well, the hardest story I'm going to share today is very deeply personal and probably why I really didn't want to talk and do this in public. But I'm really grateful because I want the world to know how great of a God we have. I truly do.
Mm-hmm.
But I shared a little bit about his journey when he was a teenager and he went missing. There's usually events that happen before, and then it starts to be a
Sure.
cataclysmic domino effect. And it was a beautiful story when God restored him back to our family. And in between that time frame, he lost his dad, and it was a really tough time. And he became a fireman because he couldn't save his dad. He couldn't resuscitate him. And so he was going to save the world. So he became a fireman. We were so proud. We were running together and getting him, we had a great relationship with that version of my son. We all have different versions in our relationships. But anyhow, he had so many pains and struggles. He had not, let's just say he hadn't rectified it in his heart. And so he struggled every anniversary on his dad's death. And then it came to us after 18 years, he'd been working on the truck. He literally could get off and he got a promotion and he became a fire inspector. And I think he was an investigator at the same time. So there had been pauses in our relationship when things would be disruptive in his heart that he would back away. He's a grown man, that does happen. And so anyhow, it was interesting that it had been a period of time and I had been praying over some things and asking God, hey, what's the problem here? Like, what are we doing? What are you doing? And how am I going to, to work with you on this? So in June, I want to say the early fall, I got a phone call or a text from him. Hey, Mom, I need to talk to you. And I was like,
Mm.
yay, God's answering my prayers, right? And so we had this great reunification, and it was just so beautiful that, the power of God, when he brings and melds something together, it's like nothing has ever happened. And that was what happened. He's like, nothing ever happened, Mom. This is crazy. I said, that's just the power of love. It's the power of forgiveness. Because nothing did happen. Hurts and wounds cause us to pick up offense and can, like you said, blame it on God or blame it on other people. And it was so good to see the hand of God. And the truth is, I wasn't concerned because I knew God had been faithful. His whole life has been my teacher, So anyway, it was going really well. He's all excited. He got off the truck and he called me on my birthday and said, hey, I'm going on vacation. It's just been crazy. When I get back, we want to come over and yada, yada. And the phone dropped, and then I didn't hear from him until I got a phone call. And so it was not even 5 days later, I think it was, I got a telephone call, and the fire inspector, the chief, I forget what you call them, the chief, the fire department, called me with his wife and said that he's very sorry, but Jeremy's gone. And that was the hardest thing I think I heard. I'm so grateful for the many years before that laid this foundation of knowing who God was, because I think that would have taken me out completely. I truly do. But that was my greatest loss. And to me, there's no greater loss this side of heaven than losing your child. And I've lost parents. I lost a 5.5-month-old little girl. I've lost a lot. And I'm certainly not measuring anybody's pain whatsoever. But for me, that was the hardest thing I think I've ever lived through. He was a decorated fireman. He laid down his life on the front lines in the CARR Fire in Redding, California in 2018. And that day, literally a piece of my heart died. It just died.
Yeah. Yeah. That is, I obviously was, it's heavy. It's such that is the part, like, this is not easy to talk about, but, I knew you obviously walking through that process, and I didn't have my own children at the time. And, I do now. And as I'm looking at just walking through this story now through the lens of being a mother, I just have such a different look on that, and can't even imagine. What were the days and the weeks like immediately following after losing Jeremy? Like, how did you cope? I mean, I feel like I would have just crawled into a black hole and probably never reemerged. Like, I just, how did you cope?
Like I said, I had built this relationship, so I was very comfortable. I didn't have questions. I didn't have blame shifting. I had come to this solid place of knowing the character of God and who he is. And the truth is, he didn't take my son. I knew he doesn't need him in heaven. He's not turning into an angel. No disrespect to anybody, but I knew that he didn't need my son. He gave his. Why would he take mine? And that's really a mother's heart. Like, when that happens, like, this is not fair. And so physically, emotionally, I was confident, and I just wept. I got up in the morning and I would cry for probably 2 or 3 hours. And Raymond was amazing. He would just touch. I worked in organ donation for a period of time in nursing, and that's when God taught me how that compassion and love doesn't have to have words. And so when he would just reach over and put his hand on me, I would just let it out and let it feel and let it come out. And I was grateful that I had the opportunity. I could do that. I didn't have to get up and go to work the next morning like so many other people have to struggle with. But I had developed trauma brain in the middle of it. My heart was going crazy. I don't have cardiac issues. I don't have physiological problems like that. I've been pretty healthy most of my life, but I had anxiety. I couldn't breathe. I had chest pain. I had cardiac irregularities. I'm like, this is not true. I was a cardiac nurse too. Like, what? This isn't happening. But when I was still seeing clients, that we had started that little trauma center at our church hub there when we were doing the ministry. And it was just hard to be so forgetful because I'm on top target. I like to know where I'm going. I like to know what I'm doing. The trauma brain really set me back for a minute. However, I think the hardest part was people's reactions. The reactions of people who don't know what to say, try to be comforting, and then they say the darndest of things, and then you find yourself taking care of their emotions. That probably was the hardest part for me. So I'd rather isolate, which a lot of us do, is to stay back. They just say stupid things like, my dog died, and I'm just like, okay, I'm so grateful for you. But I thank the Lord because he taught me how to live in the spirit so I could function in a compassionate way. It just left no room for me to deal with me all the time. There was always somebody needing something, Like I said, Raymond was beautiful in the transition. And then we transitioned from Reno, where we were, to Texas. And we had a lot of shifting parts, a lot of moving parts, and I was coming back home to just rest and recuperate. But I did like everyone else. I stayed busy. I made sure I was doing something, even the transitions after his death. I was doing everything. I was going to all the services and the things that were celebrating him for the whole year. They were really good at that. But it was just trying to distract myself from, I didn't know what was brewing, and I needed to let it out. And the funniest thing was I set my office up and I got this box down of all his baby things. Okay, this is like really vulnerable. And I pull all his baby things down, his little size 5 boots, his boots, and then his name on his little belt, because he used to go to the farm with his dad all the time. He's a little cowboy. And I put it all up in my office. And I remember when we got our home in Texas and we moved in, I remember the Lord saying to me very carefully, how long has it been since you brought that out? And I was like, what? And he's like, how long has it been? And I said, like 38 years. And so he just was reminding me that you can't bring him back. And when I camp there, that my effects and grief become exacerbated. And so it was a beautiful way how he would walk me through it, and he would cover my heart. But he's like, if you want this, then we can do this. And he just was so personal to me that my coping would go from physical problems to break down and cry. And then when I literally had to pack it all up, it took me 2 weeks to get it off the counter in the kitchen. Because I was like, okay, because I felt like I was losing tie with my son. But he's like, he's always with you, Deborah. He's applauding you on. And so that was kind of a mixed message in relationship to the effects of trauma. But I wanted to weave in how the Lord helped me through that because he does, because he cares.
Yeah. I remember this was just, I don't know, within the first probably few months after you losing Jeremy. And I came over to your house one early morning. I don't know if you remember this. I was just starting my IVF journey and I needed you to give me a shot. And I came over to your house the crack of dawn. And, you just did your best to be present and be put together because you are one of the strongest, most resilient women I know. And, we're trying to have some small talk, whatever. And we were sitting at your dining room table, and all of a sudden this Rita Springer song came on. I could probably cry thinking about it because, it's like a moment where you just feel like heaven is there. And we both just stopped and listened to the lyrics. And it says, when I thought I lost me, you knew where I left me. You reintroduced me to my heart. You picked up all my pieces, put me back together. You are the defender of my heart. Yeah. And for me, that was one of the first moments that I feel like since Jeremy had passed, that the facade, that bravery, that shell had come off, and I could see that you were really hurting. And it just allowed me to see a different perspective of you. Not that, the strong, have it all together, resilient Deborah isn't beautiful, but there was just so much strength in your vulnerability, and being able to see you express pain and know, like, wow, you are walking through literally your valley of death. And yet you still, I mean, you just sat there with your hand raised and tears streaming down your face. And in the midst of your greatest pain, you still were like, but I will praise you. And it was really, felt like a beautiful moment that I got to witness, and was something that I have drawn upon even in my own journey as well. Can you tell us a little bit about the journey on what the Lord did? Like, how did He take you on this journey to reintroduce you to yourself, as Rita Springer said in those lyrics? Like, you talk a lot about being healed through His love. So what did that part of that journey look like for you?
In the mornings after he died, and probably up for the first 18 months, but specifically in the first year, I just couldn't get out of bed. And it wasn't just because I couldn't get out of bed, I could. But after Raymond got up, I would lay there and I would just let my emotions surface. And, he reminded me who we were, who he and I were together. And he's like, we've already built this foundation. I'm like, I trust you so much. I trust you. I love your heart for me. And then he just began to talk to me like a friend. And he thanked me for not blaming him. And I was like, what? Why would I blame you? 15 years earlier, I might have. But in this place, as you walk and you begin to build this relationship with this loving God, and I know people have, listen, I've been angry at him before, but I knew that he was my friend. And that's what we started developing a friendship. People talk about friendship with God. Well, it takes an investment. You and I have been friends for 20 years, and it's off and on, and then it's in. And even when there's good times and then there's not so good times, it's like we still don't change. Like we just work through that. That's how I felt like it was with God, because inevitably in any situation, I would pursue truth. I wanted answers. And I trusted him this time. He was giving me the right answers. It wasn't my expectation. I had to lay down my own reasoning. I had to open up my heart and then look through his eyes, because I knew he was telling me the truth. He had already done so many things in my life. And I think we forget that. I think that when the great things happen and everything's restored, we're so excited we just want to get back to life. Forgetting that he is my life. He is my life. And that's who gave me breath. And so it was nothing that we really did. He just shifted my perspective because I waited for it. This time I didn't come angry, and when he thanked me for it, it broke my heart, because I thought, but you gave so much for us. You do so much for us. We just forget it. That was yesterday.
Yeah.
And in our culture that's really fast, we kind of live that way. Oh, it's gone. Okay. It's like, let's go back to remember. I asked him when I was coming over the hill after we buried him, and I was like, oh, okay, I have to go through the 12 steps of grief. Oh God, I hate this. I did this when I was nursing, and I was just, really frustrated. And he's like, oh, you don't have to do that. And I was like, I don't. Now, mind you, I already have this great relationship, but your soul is like wasted. And all I can think about is how much work this is going to be, because like, this is my firstborn son who walked life with me and really was a great friend. And so he said, well, I didn't do it. And I said, what do you mean you didn't do it? There weren't 12 steps when you were on the earth. I was like, what are you talking about? And he said, listen, I was acquainted with it. I didn't let it move in and take residence. You have to feel what's going on. The effects of grief is what you're feeling. Grief is not a person. It's not a human thing. Grief is an outcropping of how your body responds to deep sorrow and to losses and the emotions that come with that. That's completely true. So when I heard that, I said, I don't have to do this. He said, you don't. He goes, it doesn't live in my kingdom. And so I'm like, these are like big words. Like, okay, I have to process this. I have to go through, right? I have to figure these pieces out. But I had such a trust that I wasn't moved by it. I wasn't frightened by it. And because I learned to feel and cry and listen, I started healing. So when I got back here, I took 2 years to do that. And I have to tell you, it wasn't the easiest job. Even though I had this great relationship with the Lord, there was almost 18 months when we first moved here. I would walk for 2 or 4 miles, and I would be doing, I'm going to do mind over matter. I'm going to be positive. I'm going to see, I need to see my future. And I couldn't see beyond the grave. It just took me so long. I didn't know there was so much stuff that was riddled inside of me. But the funny thing was, what I did learn was that everything that the world tells us, our culture and how we practice it, God love people. If it works for you, I'm grateful for you. But what I found out, it doesn't pull the root of the loss,
Right.
because loss is permanent. Like, it's not like I can go get married again. And I don't mean that disrespectfully, because I'll never do that. But you can't just replace a child. You can't replace a brother. You can't replace those things. They are individually imprinted on your life forever. And it's a relationship that stops, and we have to figure out how to move on and take them with us. And so the closer I would draw to him, then all these things started to come into place. And I was able to experience this overwhelming love. And that's what broke me through. It's like, I put you back together. I remember that song because one day I asked Raymond, where are my shoes? Where are my keys? And he's like, they're in the refrigerator. I was so angry. I'm like, oh, I lose my son. I get all these side effects. That's not fair, But when I learned to sit with him and let his love overwhelm me, and I played that song a lot, I would be like, are all the pieces together yet, Lord? Is there something lingering? Is there something I need? And he's like, just draw close to me. Just draw close to me. And then it just became, instead of grief and loss, my heart just turned full of compassion. Like, that's what Jesus did. And I'm like, wow, he healed out of compassion, not out of duty. He loved because his Father loved us. And I'm like, can you teach me to function like that? Because people who experience grave loss, right? Great loss, all of these things, it's really hard to come up and get air. But the closer I draw to him, the more he draws to me. And that's what has helped me through it.
So beautiful. It's almost hard to even follow up on that because, we talk a lot about the Father's love, right? And I look at how throughout your whole life, he has prepared you and given you everything that you needed. Not that he took Jeremy, this wasn't his will, this wasn't part of what was supposed to be to strengthen you. But despite the fact that this still happened, he has been so good to meet you and to just shower his love on you, for a lack of a better word, and really help walk you through this. And I just, I see your heart as a mother. I really do believe there is no love like a mother's love. And just even the way that you honor Jeremy today and you talk about him, and just knowing how much you love Jeremy and your other children, right? Like, you are a remarkable mother. And knowing just a fraction of what that pain was like, and to see you experiencing joy again. Like, I know that that's exactly what Jeremy would want for you, is to continue moving and to find joy and to continue pursuing the Father. And it's just beautiful to see you take something so deeply painful and finding him through it and being able to move forward, which is different than moving on. And so I want to kind of put a bow on this conversation, because I know that we're going to unpack more as we go. But I want to talk real briefly as we close. a little bit about, what it means to you and how the Lord has taken you through this process personally for redeeming her. We talk about, the three words: release, reframe, and redeem. And that's kind of the framework of what you personally went through. So can you, on a real high level, talk about that? And then we're going to do a mini series where we deep dive into each of those. So can you give us like a little appetizer for
Sure.
release, reframe, and redeem?
If you hit the subscribe button.
Yes,
you
hit the subscribe button first. We're going to have a nice pause. Make sure you all go hit the subscribe, because our next coming up is going to be the mini series. But give us the 30,000-foot spoiler.
Okay. Releasing the pain. I kind of talked about that in my journey. It's basically you feel the emotion and you let it out, let it surface, let it out. You have to feel it to heal it. Most of us isolate, push it down, no disrespect. I've been a single mom. I know what that's like. Doing a job, doing kids, doing this. And by the time you're done, you come back and you've lost you. You're like, I don't know anything about me. And so the basic thing is that we want to feel and then we heal. Otherwise, we get stuck in our fear, and then grief begins to rise, and then we get overwhelmed by it. And then we're kind of afraid that, like I said, I was going to move forward, but I'm taking him with me versus being stuck in the emotion. So it's releasing. The basic part is that. We'll go into the dive on the next part of it. But, I'm relatively a private person, believe it or not. I do want to say that I had a friend, and this really helped me look at redeeming her. She told me to go on some Facebook groups, and she goes, I think you might find some loss and mothers groups there that will be very comforting to you. And I'm thinking, okay, so it took me a minute, but I tried it. So when I logged on to them, and you have to answer all the questions and everything, and I'm listening, and it was pulling me back into the moment of the phone call, pulling me back into the burial at the grave. Like, oh my gosh, this is killing me. And then the moms, and I would be so compassionate. And I wanted to engage with them because like community, we know what it's like. We can comfort each other. And then they're like, how long has it been? 27 years. 27 years, and you're here like it just hung up yesterday. And they're still on medication, and they've tried products, and they have not moved forward in any part of their life. And I thought, wow, I'm not going to share here, and I'm certainly not going to bare my soul. But it shocked me when I saw decades had gone by, and here they are in the same place. Now, don't get me wrong. I miss Jeremy every day. I miss him today. I miss him forever. But it's not the same, because when I had the conversation with the father who showed me how to break up with grief, to feel it and then let it pass through in those moments, it was a game changer. That was amazing. The second one would be reframing. Reframing the story. I'll give you a visual. I have this beautiful picture in my living room that my husband had, and it's this beautiful scape of light and colors and a waterfall and a mountain and all these things in there. And I was like, it's got this cheap little black frame on it. And I'm like, that's interesting. What is this? And it really didn't catch my attention. And so when I'm stressed, I need to let out creativity. So I chalk paint, or I redecorate a whole room, or all that kind of stuff that we do, because we're the same people.
Yep.
And so I looked at that and I said, hey, is it okay if I put a different frame on it? And I had this beautiful, intricately beautiful, I'll post a picture up when we do this, of this frame. And I decided to put different colors on it. And in that moment, the colors just make it pop. And then when I put it up on the wall, it was like, wow, all I had to do was change the frame, and I saw all the details, and the beauty of it drew me in. And that's what we're kind of talking about with reframing our story. Higher truth, higher before all the stuff that we didn't understand or couldn't see through, will help us change the narrative of the only piece we see in part. Because even in our trauma journey, even in my life, I'm still only seeing in part. And so when we get that higher perspective and we can reframe it, then our belief system and our hope and our future begins to unfold in front of us.
So good.
And last but not least is redemption. I have to tell you, I was so angry when I lost my son. I was like, his future was stolen. This is not okay. And he kept saying, we can redeem it. I go, how do you redeem it? And I'm just going to be way honest. He's dead. He's not coming back. That's not happening for me. And he said, it's different, Deborah. That's a permanence, yes, but he's with you always. And as we're looking at science today, they're talking about all the embryo cells that we carry from each one of our children. Of course, he's with us always, but it's different. And he said, you're not ever leaving your child behind. There is a difference. Move forward and take them with you. And so he began to teach me about redeeming what I lost. I lost time. I lost relationships. I lost confidence for many years. I lost a lot of the old person, which is actually probably good. But the point was I had to learn to even cross over the threshold like today. This was a big thing for me to do this today, you know. And God promised us in the very beginning an abundant life. You know, when he died, it didn't end my life. It didn't end my husband's life. It didn't end the people around us and the purpose and the things that really drive us with passion and pursuit. And that's what God wants to redeem. He wants to redeem the things we lost. He wants to give us a better future, and he wants to give us a full future, and we get to carry them with us.
All right. Well, now I'm not crying. You're crying. Like,
I'm
dang.
not crying this time.
No, but that's so good. And really, I'm going to just drop the mic right there and end it here because that is such a beautiful story. Thank you so much for being so vulnerable and just sharing. I know it took a lot to even get to this point. You know, it's not just even today, literally, but like this has been years, right? It's, you know, it's almost like when you read through a Bible verse and it's like, you know, and then God spoke and like 6 verses later, the whole world's created and all the animals and all the things. But it's like,
right?
That wasn't just 6 sentences later. Right. And so, you know, we're getting a snapshot of your story because you're walking through the other side. But this has been a very long journey for you getting to the freedom and the vulnerability and the intimacy that you have. So thank you for sharing. And for being so just transparent with us. And really, you know, today what you gave is you gave us a piece of your heart and you showed us a piece of the Father's love. And that is so beautiful. On that note, thank you guys for listening today. Please make sure to hit the subscribe button because we are absolutely following up with a 3-part mini-series to take a deeper dive into what some of these concepts look like. And lastly, we want to hear from you. So if there is something that we said that you guys have a question or you want to go deeper in, please leave a comment in the show notes or head over to Instagram. Our handle is @redeemingher. You can leave us a comment and we will see you on the next episode.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Appreciate you.
Thanks for tuning in with us. We pray that you're encouraged and find the truth that will set you free on your journey.
To learn more about Redeeming Her ministry or how to partner with us, please check the show notes for links or visit redeemingher.com. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode.